Support for Consider This is provided by
There's a new place for senior care with daily laundry service. A place with a day spa. A place where seniors get the care they need in the comfort of home. Home Instead Senior Care.
from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Here's a new song we want to spring on y'all tonight. Take it home where you spread it around. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. That's what election day is all about. And the biggest gun we got is called the ballot box. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. And when they're gone, we'll sing and dance and shout. And she'll bring some new ones in, and they will start the show again. And if you don't like who's in there, vote them out.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, midterm elections. Here to talk more about it are representatives from the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, Ann Charlson. Ann is the president, and Peggy Adair. Peggy is a past president and currently serves as director of public policy and as a lobbyist. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Ann, we're going to start with you. Singing, one way to drive home the point of the importance of voting. What do you find to be the most effective way?
We talk to people, we register voters, and that's when we come in contact with people who are new at the game. Some of them are people who are actually changing addresses or asking for early ballot request forms, but most of them were registering to vote. And a lot of them were doing it in the high schools. We do it on college campuses, and we also do naturalization ceremonies. So when we get them fresh off getting their naturalization papers, we register them to vote and tell them all about how to do it.
Okay, and Peggy, with so much else, there's a history here. Briefly take us back and provide us with the history of voting.
Short history of voting 101.
Yeah,
well,
there you go.
In the colonial era, the only people that were allowed to vote were free, white, landowners aged 21 or over. The presumption was that also meant that it was just men who voted. However, there were some females who owned land, and the landowners would be women who were not married, because once you were married, your property went to your husband in those days. Women who were perhaps widowed and perhaps inherited property from their families. So these women in the colonial days went to vote. And when they did, the men said, "Oh, we didn't mean you." And so slowly, New York was the first one, New Jersey, Massachusetts said, "Oh, we didn't mean you," and so they did not allow women to vote. So they actually lost the right to vote in the colonial era and didn't gain that again until 1920 with the 19th Amendment.
Okay, so League of Women Voters, how does that all fit into this mix?
Well, women fought for 72 years to try to get the right to vote back from the colonial days. And a couple of the arguments were, well, women don't have any knowledge of the process, and they also don't have any knowledge of the issues. So the League of Women Voters actually grew because of those two questions, because they were actually legitimate, that women had never voted, and so they didn't know how the process worked. They hadn't been involved in the issues, and so they weren't very sure about the issues. So the League was formed actually to help women learn how to vote and learn about the issues. And so it came from that to helping everybody understand the voting process and understand the issues.
Yeah, and women expected to be kind of a driving force here. And before we talk about that, how do you explain midterm elections to people?
Well, I explain it to them as this. The presidential elections are important. We never downplay that. But the midterms are where you vote for the people who actually perform the things you want done. They write the bills. They pass the bills, they vote on things. They touch your daily life every day. Midterms are important both at the federal level, but even more importantly, a lot of times at the local level, because those are the people you probably know. They are the people who address you directly. Municipal elections become very important then, because the people who are there sitting around the council table are the ones who are going to decide if your streets get repaired, what happens with that bridge that's falling down, what the water supply in your city is going to look like, how the sewage is going to be taken out, and how you're going to spend your tax dollars.
Okay, and why women? Why now, Ann?
There are a couple of things. I think one of the driving forces, right after the election, women felt that their voices weren't heard. It was the first time they'd had an opportunity to vote for the head of for someone on the major ballot. So the first time they got a chance to vote for president as a woman. The fact that there was a discrepancy in the ballots as far as the electoral college and the popular vote aroused a lot of people, but women especially, because it looked like the woman had gotten the shorter end of the stick there. We also have the Me Too movement, and once those things came out, there was a great uprising there where women were also coming out and saying, well, I had that experience too. I never talked about it because, one, people didn't care and they wouldn't believe me. And then I think the gun rights issue and the gun safety laws became very important after the number of rather large number of deaths from gun violence in this country, and the students kind of worked at that too, but women were very involved in that and are.
Okay, and Peggy, as Ann's talking, I'm thinking, why are you involved with the League of Women Voters? What, I mean, you're both obviously very passionate about this. You're giving a lot in terms of your time. How did you become involved in all of this?
As a young woman, I thought the League of Women Voters was about little old ladies in tennis shoes who registered people to vote. And that's what I thought, that's all they did. I was heavily involved in juvenile justice at the time, and a League member came to me and asked if I had any information on juvenile justice. I said, well, that's what I do. So of course I had information. She said they were actually doing a study on juvenile justice in Douglas County and how that was affecting young people in our county. And I thought, oh my gosh, you mean they actually focus on issues too? They actually do stuff. So I was very impressed with that. My first meeting I went to, it was about water, a local issue that I thought was going to be extremely boring, but as it turned out, it was very fascinating. And what I really enjoyed was the diversity of the people there, the diversity of color, of age, and they were all extremely smart. And I thought, you know what, I want to be a smart person too. I think I'll hang out with these people. So that's how I joined.
Wow, what a great story. And Ann, what about you?
Well, I had sent money and been interested in what was going on, but not really involved because I was in retail. And so once I retired, I thought, well, I've got some time. I'll check this out. I'd like to know more about them. And it was about the time that there were some laws being passed on voter IDs, and I found them very disturbing. And so I ran into someone, you can always find a League member somewhere trying to recruit you or trying to register you or both. And so that happened within a month or two. And so I said, well, I think I could do this. And all of a sudden it was like I had a whole new life ahead of me.
Wow.
But
very cool, very cool. Well, we're talking about midterm elections today. And Peggy, what I'd like for you to do for us now is kind of drill this down to Nebraska, right? What's important for voters, well, anybody living in Nebraska, to know at this particular time before we show some ballots and do some other things? So broad strokes for us.
Well, there are some things on the ballot in Nebraska that are very important, and I would say number one is the governor's race. We have two very viable candidates in Governor Ricketts and also in Bob Christ that are running for this office. It's very important to choose your leader carefully and well. The League does have a voter's guide that the candidates have presented their opinions and their viewpoint, and so the voters can look at that voter's guide and decide for themselves which is the best candidate for them. That's very important for the state of Nebraska. Another thing that's on the ballot that's important to everybody, I think, in Nebraska is the expansion of Medicaid health services to all Nebraskans. The legislature has worked for probably 4 or 5 years to try to advance this health care, and they have failed. And so now it's on the ballot for all people of Nebraska to vote on. So that's a very important issue.
Okay, and I think you're really touching on some really good topics here in terms of, yeah, I do, and we'll take a look at a ballot in a minute, but I think people get overwhelmed with this whole idea of feeling like they have to know everything about everyone, and so let's go ahead and show our first ballot. It'll be the general election. We'll take a look at that, and you ladies just kind of tell us what you're thinking as we see that.
Well, first of all, there are a lot of names on there, and a lot of times you get into the voting booth and you go, oh, let me think, was that the person I really wanted to vote for, or was that the one I thought was an idiot? And you have to make those decisions all the way down. It helps because in Nebraska, you can always take a voter's guide in with you that you've written little notes on. You can take in your own little mock-up sheet of how you want to vote. And so all of those things work for you.
Anything else, Peggy, that you're seeing on there that you want to add to the general election ballot?
Well, I just want to let the viewers know that in Nebraska, you don't have to know everything about all the candidates. You don't have to even vote for all of the candidates if you don't want to. If there's only one candidate that you're really interested in and really concerned about, you can vote for that one candidate and your ballot will still count. Obviously, nothing else is going to be on your ballot, but that one race that you're very interested in, you can vote on. So if there's somebody that you're not sure about, or you're just not comfortable voting either way, you can leave that blank.
Okay, and important to note, your vote will still count, though, in terms of who you had selected that you did know something about.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take a look at the next ballot, because we pulled a couple of them here for our viewers. So this is the legislature sample ballot. So again, just at first glance, a lot of information on there, right? So let's talk about, as we're looking at this particular ballot, especially mindful of everything that's involved here, certain amount of time when you go in there? Do you have all the time in the world? Tell us about that, ladies. What do we need to be mindful of in terms of time once we go in?
Well, you definitely have all the time in the world.
All the time in the world.
However, I would like to put in a plug for early voting, because one of the great things about early voting is if you get your ballot early, if you get your ballot in the mail, you can actually sit at home, sip on your cup of coffee, and take your time to fill out the ballot. It actually helps if people have dyslexia, or if they have some other issue where it does take them more time to fill out their ballot. They can do it at home with an early ballot. One thing I would like to note in particular about the legislative ballot is you will notice that there is not a D or an R by the candidates for the legislature, and that is because our legislature is nonpartisan. You vote for the candidate, you don't vote for the party in Nebraska, and that's one of the good things about our state. We really work very hard in our unicameral to try to make it a little bit more nonpartisan than the usual legislature.
Okay, and I'm just taking a look there, the instructions to voters as you're walking down, obviously very important for people to take a look at that first. One of them, do not cross out, do not erase, make sure that you're, grabbing a new ballot there too, and not to fold and so forth. I mean, for some of our viewers, this is kind of old hat to some of us. For some viewers, this will be the first time,
Absolutely.
That they're walking in, and that can be very, very overwhelming. One final point I want to make here, we see the blanks, ladies, right? So people are able to write in. How often does that happen? Just curiously.
More often than you would think, and
Really?
more interesting candidates than you would think, like Mickey Mouse. Yes.
And for those legitimate ones, do any of those names ever come up then that you can recall? Are there any write-ins that eventually made their way into off the top of your heads, or?
I don't recall in Nebraska, but it can happen.
Actually, Lisa Murkowski, who is the senator from Alaska, is a write-in candidate who won on a write-in ballot.
Okay, so to be taken very seriously, you never know what's going to happen, and we got kind of go from there. We did touch a little bit on registration. So I believe by the time this program airs, online and mail-in won't be an option. But if folks do want to register, what's important to note there?
There, you need to go in person to your county election office, and for us that would be the Douglas County Election Office on 115th Street. And there you can fill out a ballot, and at the same time, if you want to vote early or you want to vote by mail, you can actually fill out a request that same time and ask to fill out a request for an early ballot, and they can just hand you one. You can take it home and fill it out.
Yeah, really it's such a good idea, especially for our older adult populations and for folks who aren't maybe as mobile, to be able to get out, but yet their vote still counts. What they think still matters. And so the idea of getting things to people is great, right? So, okay, I do want to fast forward now, November 6th, Election Day. We all wake up that morning. What can we expect? Ann?
Well, you'll go to, if you're voting in person, when you go to your election area, it'll say you'll get a little card ahead of time that tells you where your precinct votes. And as you go in, this year they'll have greeters, and they'll check to make sure your name is on the list. So if you're not on the list, they can check to make sure you're in the right place. And then they can go forward from there if there's any reasons. People who want to use the auto vote, which is a voting system for people who have different kinds of disabilities, visual and mobility issues, can be helped. Also, if you want to vote from the curb because you have a problem getting out of your car, you can ask and someone will take a ballot out to you so you can vote there once they check you off the list.
I'm not sure I was aware of that.
Yes, we can do that as well.
Pretty cool. So let's drive home that point then for viewers again. You can be in a lot of different situations, but you're making this as feasible and doable as possible for folks.
And if you've
right?
taken someone if you take a friend with you who has to help you for some reason, either mobility or vision or whatever, you can let you sit down and at a table a little away from the area and sit there and walk through the ballot with that person.
Wow. And Peggy, what do I need to bring with me?
Nothing. You do not have to bring any kind of identification in Nebraska, and that's a very important issue, dear to the hearts of the League of Women Voters, because voter identification is a method of voter suppression, and the League is all about encouraging more people to vote and, again, educating people on the voting process, and the opposite of that would be voter suppression, and voter ID is a part of that.
Okay. And one of the things that I want to walk through, I know, Ann, you took some time to pull together, leave it to the League to have all sorts of information. You have referenced some of these items as we've been going along in this conversation, but I do want, and I'm going to have you, Ann, hold these up to this camera. If you could hold that steady. I promise to vote because. Tell us what you're holding.
I'm holding a pledge to vote, and we especially use this with first-time voters and young voters. The studies have shown that people who sign these are more likely to vote because they've made you a promise. And it's all about not just getting people registered, but getting them involved in voting. And once they get in the habit of voting, they pretty much never stop.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you. Perfect. And we have another item here, a little bit smaller, but tell us about that.
This is a Vote 411, and this is a fridge magnet. And we use these to tell you to go to Vote 411. If you go in and put your address and zip code in, it will pull up your specific ballot. And you can either run it off or you can read it online, whichever works for you. And that way you know exactly what you're going to be looking at once you go to vote.
Very, very good. Okay, excellent. And we have another here. This is kind of a mini booklet.
Yeah.
Go ahead and hold this one up, and we won't ask you to go through the whole thing, but
Right.
kind of summarize what that is for us.
Most of the leagues, if they possibly can, put together, actually we pull up the information from the Vote 411, and put it in printed form for people who like that tangible paper in the hand. They want to write notes on it. They want to go through and discuss and look at different things and look at ballots that are not necessarily their own. We also will be printing this in Spanish, so it should be out probably the end of next week in the Spanish language. These are out in the libraries now, and then we'll deliver them to some schools and then to various organizations.
Very good. Okay, excellent. I'll take that back
And then
from
one
you.
thing I'd like to,
Yeah.
to comment about the voter's guide is our voter's guide does not tell people how to vote or who to vote for. It simply gets the information out there, so they decide for themselves.
Okay, great segue into, and we talked a little bit about this one too, but this is the how to pick a candidate. And I do think in this day and age, even though it seems like that's all we really hear about, it's that message and trying to dig in a little bit more in terms of who these people are. I took a close look at this earlier, and you actually have a step-by-step process for people, especially those new to the process. Ann, tell us a little bit about this.
Well, and it also has a candidate report card on the back, and you can fill in the things that are most important to you and then check off how those candidates work on this chart. It may be that you really like the way a candidate sounds on one thing, but it's not an issue that's important to you. But you see someone else who really speaks to that specific issue. The other thing too is when you're voting for a candidate, there's no point in voting for a candidate who can't affect the issue you're interested in. And that happens a lot of times when we hear a lot about Senate races and what those people will be deciding on, and it may be that, but you're looking at the Congress, and they're not going to be voting on those issues at all. They'll be voting on a different set of things. So make sure that the person you're voting for can actually affect that particular thing you're interested in. And then it goes through all sorts of things about how to listen to ads, when you're listening to real information and when you're just hearing babble.
Yeah, how to work through all of that.
Yes.
Peggy, it seems like you are making this as easy as possible for folks, and yet what is the average percentage for voter turnout in terms of the midterm?
Oh, midterms tend to be low, and there's a lot of complicated issues that go into that. So, but all we can do is educate voters and work as hard as we possibly can to get more people to vote. A lot of people feel that their vote doesn't count, that their vote doesn't matter, and also I think a lot of people are afraid of making the wrong decision. You would be surprised, talking to young people, I'm afraid to vote because I'm not sure about making the right decision. And again, that's where our voter's guide and a lot of guidance like that comes into play, is helping people feel comfortable making that decision.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Ann, so how do we start to turn this around? I mean, you might have some that say that is an awful lot of information, but it's good information. It will help you base a sound decision, right? So how are we going to turn this around, do you think?
One thing you impress upon people, you don't have to vote for everything. If you run into some of those items on there, it's okay to pass it up. The other thing is, do you really think everybody else knows exactly who they're voting for? So, but just to empower people to feel that their votes do count, and remind them that, yes, we do, we talked to the election office here, they count every vote. They count votes even after the election's decided. They still count every vote. They go through all the provisional ballots. They count all of those that are good to count, that are actual, and they count all of the early ballots. They count everything.
That's one thing in Nebraska. I think people can be very confident in our election process in Nebraska. We do have in Nebraska a paper trail. So you can be confident that if there needs to be a recount, they'll be counting those paper ballots. So there will be something there tangential for them to be able to count. I have every confidence in our election system. I have every confidence in our Secretary of State and our county clerks. They work really, really hard to make our system as trustworthy as possible in Nebraska.
Okay, thank you. And Ann, in about the 30 seconds or so that we have remaining, final thoughts to leave with our viewers of all ages, right? Some coming into this for the first time, some who have just been doing this forever. Final thoughts.
Your vote counts. Please vote. You'd be surprised once you start doing it how much you do know. That you've heard a lot about some of these people. You've seen them, you've read about them in the papers, your friends have talked about them. You're as smart as anyone else voting out there, and you should take the time to do it.
Okay, very good advice. Very, very good advice. If people want more information on our program today, midterm elections are what we're talking about, we're going to have them go to some websites here. We have sos.ne.gov. We have lwv.org. And the Omaha number for League of Women Voters is 402-344-3701. The final website there, vote411.org. Ann and Peggy, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your time, expertise, your stories. I want to wish you well in the weeks to come. They're going to be busy for you, but best wishes to both of you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. And I want to thank the students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at St. John Paul II Newman Center in Omaha is seen through the lens of Ulysses Orozco, a junior right here at UNO. We will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/Consider This. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
Support for Consider This is provided by
There's a new place for senior care, a place with flexible meal plans and 24-hour room service. A place where seniors get the care they need in the comfort of home. Home Instead Senior Care.